In the summer of 1994, four teens entered an abandoned building in Gravesend, Brooklyn. It was the last time they would be seen alive. With few clues and no witnesses, the case went cold. But for Anthony Brewer, the brother of one of the victims, the search never stopped. In 2024, he acquired evidence from the police that contained DNA samples that didn't match the teens. That discovery put his life and the life of his family in grave danger. Goosebumps, The Vanishing. All episodes now available on Disney Plus and Hulu on disneyplus.disney.com. Rated TV 14LB.
Man, sometimes if you have an injustice wound, you are also doing a disservice to yourself while trying to seek justice in the world. Guys, what's going on? Welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, and up your you. I'm your host, Isaiah, and this might be an interesting episode for some. So my back has been hurting. My lower back has been driving me nuts, and I like to do this thing where, I like researching things. It's fun. I get a little curious and I'm like, oh, I wonder what this means, not just from a physical standpoint, because it's like, yeah, I know, my lower back, there are some injuries there, some very latent injuries that I've been working through over just the course of my life. Tightness in other places, right? Stress related stuff, emotional, spiritual, energetic stuff. And then I always get curious about the emotional, spiritual, energetic component, right? Because we don't always apply it to that. And I think it's dope to just kind of step out on the edge a little bit, if you will, okay? And lower back pain is usually tied to stress. Sometimes it be depression, right? There's something that you are carrying, right? And it's sitting in the wrong place. Now, just to get a little bit nerdy on you. So one of my favorite exercises in the gym is squats. Love barbell squats. I love lifting heavy, right? I love that. I truly enjoy it. And you can't squat properly with a weak core, right? Because if you have a weak core, then you're not stabilizing your body to support the weight that you're carrying, and your lower back will compensate to carry that weight, right? So now your discs are being pushed in a weird way. Your hips are out of alignment. A lot of times your knees even will start to try to carry the weight as well. And you are forcing yourself to sustain this weight versus actually lifting it properly. So with squats, it's always a good, when you're good, when you're in that space, because everything just feels fluid. When you're not, you feel it. It is a very humbling exercise, and it will humble you very quickly. So whenever I'm doing squats, I pay attention to my lower back. How does it feel? Right? I know if my lower back is feeling a little quirky, it's from maybe I slept wrong, or just, my core is weak, or stress, right? Or my hips are kind of tight and they're out of alignment too. Sometimes it's all the above. So I say all that to say is, energetically and spiritually, when you are experiencing a lot of lower back pain, based on research, sometimes it can be due to sadness, right? Suppression of certain things, stress, right? Basically carrying things poorly in the wrong spaces, because the rest of you is not stabilized properly to support and sustain that weight. You get me? And it's just cool to kind of like do some sort of, correlation or just find a commonality in a ways that you understand. And my dreams recently have been very, very interesting. And when I woke up, the first thing that came to mind was injustice, right? There are, I think, 5 wounds of the soul, injustice being one of them. And I was thinking about it. I was like, man, I read up on what the injustice wound is, and there's so much. And I think I might do a bonus episode on it in itself, just because there's a lot of information in terms of what the injustice wound is, what it looks like, how to process it, yada, yada, yada. But overall, it comes back down to feeling a fear of rejection, feeling all these negative responses to people or things in the world because of how you may have been treated from an early stage in life, right? A rigidness of some sort. If you are a high achiever, right? A lot of times you had the injustice wound of always being compared to somebody else. You might be super sensitive, but you repress your emotions, right? Very rigid in the world, right? You need to control your environment. You can be very closed off in a lot of ways, or perceived that way. And in actuality, you're sensitive. You just haven't had the space to kind of express yourself. The injustice wound in itself is very interesting, I also think a lot of people may experience it more than they realize. Even I was like, oh, wait, this is something interesting here. And, sometimes we go through life thinking or believing that other people will have the same virtues or moral compass or value system as we do. And we get caught up in this space of rigidity, right? Or despair, okay? Or we think that because someone doesn't communicate the same that we do, it is us being rejected, right? Or abandoned, or something injustice like. And that's not always the case. However, it can be, right? And I think that's the beautiful thing about nuance and also understanding yourself more, because you can kind of start to, if you don't understand yourself and you are not processing what's going on, anything that comes your way can be an offense, right? Anything that comes your way can be an offense. And if you are too eager to be understanding, quote unquote, you may not read the room, okay? And you may kind of appease others and allow certain things to happen to you that should not be happening, all right? So there's a healthy balance of awareness. And I think in society today as a whole, you kind of got to just really be more, I guess, intentional in terms of who you're getting information from, like how heavy-handed is it in one space, right? One of my dreams I had, there was a moment where someone was being treated poorly, right? Treated very poorly. And the other person retaliated, right? And the person who retaliated was the one that got reprimanded, and they faced harsh consequences. While the other person who was doing what they were doing and very comfortable doing just that, there was no consequences for them. They kind of got to go through life as they usually do. And it happened a couple of times. And I woke up kind of angry. It's just like, what the hell is going on? What's going on with this? This is not okay. Right? This is not okay. And the acknowledgement of that, it's okay, right? It's okay. And I think subconsciously, I've been aware of it too. Like certain things happening in my waking life that I may find kind of off kilter. And I'm like, you know what? It's not cool. I'm not cool with it. I'm not chill with it. It's just what it's going to be, right? For me. Other people may find peace in it, or they may recognize it's not okay either. However, what they're doing about it is next to nothing. Okay. And even that I'm okay with. The reason why is because we have to understand, how do I explain this? What you deem as good for you, even if it's a universal kind of deal in your eyes, may not apply for everybody else for their own reasons. Okay? Last week I talked about survivor's remorse, right? Like understanding that what you deem successful is not what somebody else is going to deem successful, right? What you deem as an injustice, even if it's not cool, like even on the bare bones, like basic respect level, someone else may still not see it as that. And even if they do, in that moment, they don't see it as that, right? Because it doesn't work for them. A lot of things we do in life is based on convenience. Convenience of what works for me and how it's going to keep the status quo for me. So if you have a deep injustice wound, you're going to be sensitive to a lot more. And sometimes your sensitivity can override your ability to just recognize, all right, cool, what's going on? Let me be a little bit more rational. Or let me recognize that me kind of having this response is not going to change things around me. It's not going to change people around me. Okay. Acceptance of certain things is not tolerance of it. Understanding certain things is not enduring those things. And that's something that I really learned. I didn't struggle to learn. I just kind of allowed it to be. Okay. And having conversations with other people sometimes, it may feel like, all right, cool. The point's not being made. Your desire is for me to think like you and operate like you for whatever reason. Maybe because you operate this way or this is what you are comfortable with. And that doesn't work. So, one thing I would suggest is when you find yourself over explaining yourself to other people, or you feel like you were trying to convince somebody of your worth and how you deserve to be treated, stop. You don't need to convince a person who is already convinced that you deserve to be treated well. You don't need to convince a person who is emotionally mature and aware enough. Okay? And we got to understand, just because we are willing to speak on certain things doesn't necessarily always make us the most emotionally mature either. Right? You just got to be truthful. You really got to be truthful and be cognizant of how much work do you do on yourself versus how much work you are demanding of other people. Okay? Something that I work on and I just understand is like, I am not here to change anybody. I can't. So I don't try to. Right? We can have a conversation. I'll express certain things and I'll try to be as objective as possible. However, whatever you do is what you do. I accept that. Right? And while I accept it, I don't necessarily tolerate things that I don't deserve or I don't feel are good to me, right? So I don't box myself in those four corners of, let's say, empathy, compassion, acceptance, and tolerance, because I feel like those are like usually the four horsemen of social interactions, right? People want you to be more empathetic and understanding, while they themselves are not showing up with that, right? Because if they had empathy on their end, they'd be a little bit more aware of how their behavior affects you, right? The whole tolerance thing is like, tolerance and acceptance are not the same thing. Me accepting and understanding a person has nothing to do with me continuing a relationship with them if I recognize that what I understand, I also recognize is not healthy, okay? Leaving room for nuance. In the injustice wound, sometimes there is a hypersensitivity that you may carry with you. And I don't want to say cognitive dissonance. I don't think that's what the word is, but sometimes you may be so passionate about one thing, and truth be told, it's not about that, right? The injustice comes up, but it's not about that thing. It's about something else, right? That's why, like, even with virtue signaling, sometimes you notice that there is an outcry for one thing, but also it's like, well, your own neighbor's backyard is on fire. Why aren't you doing something about that? Why are you so worried about this thing over here? And the reason why sometimes is because what I really should be worried about hits a little bit too close to home, and I don't want to process that. So I'll put my passion into something else that's a little bit more removed from me. You get what I'm saying? It requires less work of me. Okay? So it's important to not be so understanding that you are allowing and enabling certain things either. Because that's a tricky one too. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to make sense of things. And sometimes you can't make sense. The reason why is because you don't have all the information. You don't have somebody's whole life experience, right? You don't have somebody's brain. You don't have access to that. So why they may navigate life the way that they do, you will never know, right? But all you can recognize is like, what am I on the receptive end of? Have I had the conversation with this person? How have they adjusted, or how have we adjusted to be more present for each other? Or has that not happened, right? But sometimes, and too often, before we are even having the opportunity to process how we are feeling about something or what was done to us, you have somebody coming in and saying, well, you know, it was probably hard for them. That was a hard decision, etc. It's like, look, I don't need you to speak for this other person, because in some ways you are speaking for yourself and what you are capable of, right? And sometimes people are telling us quickly to understand somebody else, and it kind of removes our own process of what's going on. Okay. So you can allow yourself and understand that, yeah, I may be feeling off about this for a reason. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the experience in itself. It could just be triggering a certain wound that you're not aware of. You get me? And it just kind of correlates, or it just hits that same lever. Right? So being self-aware is so vital, because it will allow you to navigate your experiences with a little bit more clarity, right? Am I upset about this thing, or is it something else? Okay. Am I being so understanding that I'm overriding the actual experience? Or am I trying to be understanding because I'm trying to avoid something else? Okay. There are levels to it. There are layers to it. And I think it's important to recognize when we do have these big feelings to simply work through them, right? Because how we present it in our relationships can be a determinant of a lot of things, right? Everybody has responsibility in the relationship. Everybody has responsibility. It is not your responsibility to kind of override or kick under the rug somebody's behavior that may have affected you, because you don't want to make them feel uncomfortable for how they have treated you, right? But it is also not somebody else's responsibility to be the bearer of your trauma that is unprocessed, right? Accountability on both ends, okay? People have to be willing to acknowledge their behavior and how it may have attributed to certain circumstances or the outcome of a relationship. If they're not, then you just got the information, right? But one thing you don't want to do, or, feel like you are doing, is trying to convince somebody to see your point, trying to convince somebody to treat you better, trying to convince somebody to stick around in a relationship that they are evidently not willing to take care of when it comes to you. Okay? If somebody is not willing to adjust or grow on their own, you are not going to do that for them. Not with threats, not with constant combativeness, nothing. All you can do is accept, hey, this experience made me feel a certain way. What does that mean, right? Can I dip back a little bit and figure out where this may be coming from? Okay, what tools am I using to process it right now? Okay. Because I think sometimes society too often is kind of absolving people of their responsibility, especially nowadays, right? Even with communication. Oh, someone does not have to, respond to you. People are in control of themselves, and no one has to respond to you. And it's like, that's so shitty to hear, guys. It's so shitty because it doesn't take much. And truth be told, there's no one I know that works 24 hours in a day. And most people nowadays, with the way social media is booming, and I say this all the time, everybody has access to something. And talking and communication are not the same thing. I can communicate to you that I can't talk right now, right? I could communicate to you that, hey, I'm going through this thing at the moment, and my ability to talk or, speak to you about something may just be off at the moment. Hey, I can communicate to you, hey, I got your message. I'm just going to take a minute to process this and, figure out how I feel before I come back to the table. But I'll be back, right? Talking and communication are not the same thing. All right. And communication allows community, right? Talking is just kind of words. Okay. And that in itself can feel very unjustified in a lot of ways too, because it's like, well, I'm just supposed to sit here and wait for you to deal with me. It's like, no, that feels weird. It feels rude too. And again, somebody who operates in that vein, they're comfortable with it. And a lot of times they know exactly how they move, and it is not your job to convince them otherwise. Your job is to be convinced of their behavior and their actions, and also be willing to understand how you were feeling about it before you try to be so understanding of their behavior that you allow it and enable it to continue in your relationship, and you just become very resentful. Okay, the injustice wound is a very interesting thing. I was just reading up on it, and like I said, I woke up from my sleep thinking about it, just because there have been so many things that have just kind of been happening or I've been cognizant of. And sometimes there is a willingness for us to try to fix a situation that we didn't destroy, right? And it's like, okay, let me be the bigger person, etc. And sometimes, you know what, guys? Being the bigger person also looks like taking up room, taking up space, okay? Not running in to fix something that you didn't break. If somebody's treating you poorly, they're treating you poorly, right? And if they are not willing to come to the table and express, certain things or try to remedy the situation authentically, then that's not something for you. You need to figure out. Sometimes our eagerness to understand people is to kind of keep them in our lives. And sometimes people are showing you they don't want to be there. So take that as their truth. Okay? Take that as their truth. Okay, the whole thing, we are not responsible for each other, etc., I call BS. I always say, if I'm in a relationship with someone else, my friends, family, it doesn't matter who, if I am occupying space in your life, I am responsible for that space, how I take care of it, how I treat you, right? The patterns that I'm creating with you, consciously or subconsciously. I am responsible for you. I am responsible for my behavior towards you. I am responsible for how I take care of you, right? And if we understood more of that, I think we'd have a lot more of a healthier society. However, everybody's kind of operating on this sense of like, what you think of me is none of my business. I'm not responsible for how you feel. I don't have to communicate to you, right? I don't have to talk to you, right? I don't have to get back to you right away, and all these other things. People are always looking for ways to not show up in relationship, with the expectation that you should do the legwork to continue it. You get me? So if you have a deep injustice wound, slow down a little bit. Slow down and be kinder to yourself as well, okay? Because a lot of times you have these grand expectations of yourself in order to be valued by other people, right? Which is why you're always willing to jump into action, fix things, right? Overachieving, okay? All of these things can be an indication of an injustice wound. Right? You're very controlling of your environment. Okay? These are all telltale signs. And it's okay to want to, see the world as a better place. But you know what? Just recognize you are only in control of yourself, guys. And people do not change for you. They change for the things that they value. So don't spend your life trying to get somebody to change their behavior when it comes to you, because the likelihood that's not going to happen. They'll resist, right? People, we're creatures of habit. So a lot of times we will resist a level of change if it's not coming from us. Okay. And that's important to understand too. But you don't need to go around trying to change people. Let that go. Right. And understand your need or willingness or desire to want somebody else to change is also you taking away from what it is that you are not working to adjust or grow from in yourself. Okay. Because if you are demanding change from someone else, that indicates a lack of growth on your end. Right. There's nothing noble about saying, oh, yeah, if this person would just change and do ABC. No. Right. Because the fact that you're even expecting that goes to show that you are not working through your own process. There's a balance to everything, guys. So what you can do in the meantime is just understand when something doesn't feel right, explore that. Okay. And it's okay to not jump in to fix a situation. Let people sit with the discomfort of their own feelings. Maybe they won't, but maybe they will. Either way is not for you to remedy the situation. You can't do two things at one time, right? You can't honor your feelings while trying to protect somebody from their own behavior and protect somebody from their own accountability. Sometimes people are going to feel like shit for being shitty people. That's kind of a part of it, right? A lot of times people do not want to be labeled as a bad person while doing bad things. People like doing bad things without being labeled a bad person. Okay. And sometimes the more you're jumping in to kind of play kumbaya and make sure everything is cool, it keeps people from their own work, whether it's with you or someone else. You don't always have to jump in. Hold yourself accountable, though. Have a conversation when it's necessary. Otherwise, give people room. Give people room. Okay? And that wound of yours, tend to it, right? Stop demanding so much of yourself. Stop being so harsh of yourself, right? Stop thinking that the world doesn't like you. That's also another thing too. There are people out there who value the hell out of you. You just have to be one of them. Because the more assured you are of who you are and how you show up in the world and how you take care of yourself, how somebody else moves, even if it stings, it won't sting for too long. You'll move past it a little bit. Why? Because I can recognize, you know what? I know how I show up in the world. I'm aware of that. There's proof of it. I have relationships that reinforce it and reflect it. So this one person or these couple of people are not the determinant of who I am, even though it feels weird to me and I am taking their neglect, their rejection, their disrespect as a personal thing. It has nothing to do with me. Just like how I show up in the world has nothing to do with them, right? I'm just me. All right. So just, think about that. Like I said, I think I might do a full bonus episode on this because there's a lot to unpack. And I was like, oh, there's a lot here that I didn't even realize about the injustice wound. Okay. And again, if you were advocating for other people, right, you have a acute sensitivity to people being mistreated, etc. Think about your history. It comes from somewhere. Or if you want everybody to like you, right? Think about your history. Okay? I hope this all made sense. And it all came from lower back pain. It all came from my back hurting. And what I recognize too is like sometimes we are carrying a weight that's not ours. Okay? Or we are carrying certain things improperly. Right? It's sitting in the wrong space. What I recognize is sometimes what I'm carrying is not mine, right? I've done the heavy lifting, okay? And I don't need to continue carrying heavier just because somebody else does not want to carry their weight, okay? Stop carrying other people's weight for them, okay? You got your own to carry, right? And pay attention to your body because it will tell you what's going on, all right? That's all I got for you guys, okay? Hope you guys have an amazing week. I hope you guys just tune into your body, right? Pay attention to where you're holding stress. I want you guys to pay attention to when you feel like an attack, right? When certain things just kind of hit you in a weird way. and you feel the need to justify or over explain yourself or jump into action, pause. Take a pause. Right? Sometimes there is truth to it. And sometimes that person may reflect certain things for you. Sometimes they may not, right? Take your time. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take flight. Oh, by the way, guys, I got some new merch out. Speaking of, so I created a merch line called You Matter Too. And basically it just comes from this idea of recognizing your significance in the world. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to remind others how caring they are, how amazing they are, that we may overlook ourselves, or we may exist in spaces that overlook us too. But you matter too. I intended, or I made it, or I created it for the simple fact of just, wearing something that reminds you to just take a look at your own heart. Okay. And being mindful of how significant that is in the world. And while you are out here trying to take care of everybody else and remind everybody else of their space and how great they are, I hope you realize you matter too. All right. The link is in bio for the merch. I'll be dropping some more designs for it, but right now I officially released it to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the Bird Brain podcast. And it's something that's very meaningful to me. Just on brand in terms of what I talk about, in terms of taking care of yourself and honoring yourself. And it's not about being selfish, right? It's, that's never my goal, is like, oh yeah, you're the only person in this world. No, just having a balance, because there are a lot of people who are willing to show up for others. And they're not always met with the same presence, okay? And then that could become a vicious cycle. So the more you learn that you matter in such a big way, the more you'll start taking more pauses, okay? And the more you'll be aware of what spaces create room for you versus you trying to force yourself to fit there because they don't offer you much. Okay, so the link is in the bio. Get your merch. Folks have already bought it up, so I love that. And just carry that little reminder with you. All right, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take flight.